Hey everybody, it's Miss C, fourth grade teacher at Syracuse Academy of Science and Citizenship Charter School. And now for social studies today, we are going to continue a lesson on Native Americans because there were Native Americans here who lived here for a very, very long time. So we learned the origin of how Native people came to inhabit America and South America from the land bridge from Asia into Alaska and America. And that was a long, long, long time ago. So I think it's important to learn about Native Americans because of the fact that they lived here for so long. They still live here, right? And a lot of their freedoms were taken away when people from Europe came and settled this area. We know that the diseases wiped out a lot of the native population because they didn't have those immunities that Europeans had because they had never been exposed to those types of diseases. We also know that there was a lot of war because essentially Europeans were invading Native American territory, right? They were invading their home, and so they were trying to protect it. Um, and now we live a society where Native people, a lot of them live on reservations on small portions of land that they were able to keep. And there are Native Americans that existed all over the continent of America and in the Northeast because that's where we're from, right? We live in New York, that is the northeastern portion of the United States. And so we are going to use Get Epic. I know you all have been reading a lot of books, and that is so exciting. It's very important to keep reading even while we are remotely learning. You want to keep up your skills in reading and be great readers, and there's so many awesome books out there. So, Get Epic is something great that you should all continue to use. And today we're going to use it to read about the Northeast, Native nations of the Northeast. And so this introduces the native nations of the Northeast United States, including the Abenaki, the Haudenosaunee, the Lenape, the Narragansett, and the Ojibwa. So those are some of the nations that have resided in the Northeast. And so specifically where we live in Onondaga County and where we go to school, that is the Onondaga Nation, and they are a nation of Haudenosaunee people. So let's start reading. Here we have the table of contents where we can see the different chapters. This book is written by a woman named Barbara Kreisner. She writes nonfiction poetry for children and adults, and she holds a MFA, which means a Master's of Fine Art in Writing for Children and Young Adults from the Vermont College of Fine Arts, and teaches children's literature and creative writing at William Paterson's University in New Jersey. She is currently pursuing a Master's in Public History. A lot of education she has behind her. Here we have a map of the United States and Canada. Here's some of Greenland, and we have Mexico over here. Now you see this darkened area. The key says that that is the Northeast Native Nation. So they inhabited all of this area here. Elders tell the oral history of how Native peoples have lived in the Northeast for thousands of years. The early peoples of the Northeast relied on the region's lush forests and plentiful lakes and rivers. Water gave them life. They farmed and harvested their crops. They hunted and fished. To take advantage of seasonal food sources, some groups lived in one place during the summer and another place during the winter. Other groups stayed in one place year-round. The Northeast region's western boundary touches the current Midwestern states of Minnesota, Iowa, and Missouri. The eastern boundary ends at the Atlantic Ocean. The region extends as far north as the Canadian province of Ontario and Quebec. Its southern boundary reaches the states of Tennessee, Virginia, and North Carolina. So that is that big map that we just saw where the darkened area was telling us where the Northeast region for the Northeast Native region is. So these tribes that we're reading about, the Northeast tribes, they reside in all those areas. And it was just outlining that for us. So historically, Northeast tribes often fought against each other for land and resources. So now we know also that before European settlers came to the Americas, that and there between the natives and the Europeans, before that even happened, there was war between native tribes also, and they fought over land and resources. Some groups formed long-lasting friendships that would protect them from attacks, so they were like allies. One of these pacts was the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, also known as the Iroquois Confederacy, which was initially made up of 5 nations. Another confederacy, known as the Three Fires, brought together the Ojibwa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. Many nations have called the Northeast home. These groups include the Abenaki, Mi'kmaq, Narag, Pequot, and what is known as New England. They also include the Haudenosaunee, mostly in New York, and the Lenape in New Jersey. The Powhatan of Virginia are also part of the Northeast nations. Groups such as the Ojibwa live in Minnesota, Michigan, North Dakota, Wisconsin, and parts of Canada. Nearly every nation of the Northeast descends from one of 2 language groups, Algonquian-speaking and Iroquoian-speaking peoples. The Algonquins lived in wigwams. They farmed and fished. Men in Algonquin communities held more power than the women. The Haudenosaunee lived in longhouses. They farmed the 3 sisters: corn, beans, and squash. Women in the Haudenosaunee communities held more power than men. European settlement, war, and disease affected native nations differently. Only a few nations survived with their practices and languages intact. Others had no choice but to live among the European settlers. Many children were sent to boarding schools far from home and forced to give up their traditions. Many nations of the Northeast have never regained their heritage. They no longer have speakers of their native languages. The loss of their people, land, and traditions affected the ability of some native groups to be federally recognized by the United States government. A few are state recognized but not federally recognized. Several native groups continue to fight for federal recognition. Without federal recognition, they do not have tribal rights to hunt in the forests and fish in the waters. Without state or federal recognition, they cannot sell their arts and crafts such as beadwork and baskets. Federal recognition gives tribes sovereignty, or the right to govern themselves. Okay, so we just learned a lot about some of the history of Native people. We did the European settlers changed the way that these Native nations lived by moving them, by taking away their land, by really wiping out some of their populations because of disease and war. We know that they impacted deeply Native history and Native culture. By many children were sent to boarding schools far from home and forced to give up their traditions. So Europeans, what they wanted to do is they wanted everyone, including Native Americans, to look like, sound like, and be like Europeans. So these families were torn apart. Some Native people were sent to boarding schools where they would dress just like the European settlers. They weren't allowed to wear their cultural clothing that was traditional to them. They were not allowed to speak their native language. They had to learn how to speak English. So for the sake of making this video shorter, I would like to specifically read about the Haudenosaunee because they're native to the area that we all live within, including Onondaga, Oneida, Cayuga. Those areas are all named after different tribes of the Haudenosaunee. The Haudenosaunee, also known as the Iroquois, are the people of the Longhouse. So here's a picture of their Longhouse. 6 nations made up the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. They are the Mohawk, Oneida, Cayuga, Onondaga, Tuscarora, and Seneca. Most live on reservations in New York. The Oneida have members living in Wisconsin. The Cayuga and Seneca have members living in Oklahoma as part of the Seneca-Cayuga Nation. These 2 groups were forced out of their traditional lands. Today, they are involved in legal action in New York to regain land in Seneca and Cayuga counties. In 1722, the Confederacy included its It included Six Nation, the Tuscarora. They are an Iroquois-speaking people originally from North Carolina. Most members moved north to accept Haudenosaunee protection from the European colonists and other native nations in the area. The Tuscarora have a reservation in New York. However, the southern band of Tuscarora are not part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. They live in North Carolina. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy has a population of more than 80,000 people in the United States and 45,000 in Canada. The Mohawk are the largest Haudenosaunee nation in New York with more than 11,000 members. They run a casino, a hotel, and a spa. The Mohawk community at Canateo-Hereke in New York runs a farm. It also teaches visitors about the Haudenosaunee. The community offers many classes. It also teaches visitors about the Haudenosaunee. The community offers many classes, including language immersion and workshop on Haudenosaunee culture and religion. The Oneida have more than 16,000 members, mostly in Wisconsin. They own the Indian Country Today Media Network. The Oneida Nation Museum shows the tribe's art and daily life. The museum preserves their history and culture for future generations. Traditional and modern works of art give visitors a glimpse of Oneida past and present. The Seneca run 2 casinos, including one at Niagara Falls. Gaming is a big part of the Seneca economy. Few people speak the Seneca language today. For this reason, the Seneca Nation of Indians encourages students to learn their ancestors' language. Young children hear the language in the nation's preschool. The nation also sponsors language and culture classes. The nation wants children to grow up speaking the Seneca language so it is not forgotten. The game of lacrosse is very important in Haudenosaunee culture. In the native language, the game's name means they bump hips. Lacrosse is a team sport in which each player has a stick with a small net at one end. Players try to score by shooting the ball into the opponent's goal. The Haudenosaunee use lacrosse as a way to bring communities together. So we have a picture right here of the Iroquois Nationals lacrosse team competes in international competitions. In 2014, the team defeated Australia to win the bronze medal at the World Lacrosse Championship. It's very cool. We see there's sticks with the net, and lacrosse is a very intense game, actually, and that's really awesome. So we see it says Onondaga men and women known as faith keepers are responsible for making sure ceremonies are performed. They are busy all year round. Ceremonies celebrate midwinter maple sap, planting, beans, strawberries, green corn, and the harvest. Faith keeper Oren Lyons has traveled around the world speaking about the importance of protecting the environment. So that is a huge part of Native American culture, is that a lot of Native tribes believe that land and the earth belongs to no one. And I think that is really beautiful and a really amazing way to think about things, or a really interesting perspective to have. So instead of thinking this is my land, this is my yard, this place is mine and all the resources that it has are mine, Native cultures believe that the earth belongs to no one, and that it is every person's job to protect the planet and preserve all of the resources that it has that help us live for future generations. And that is so great. So if you really thought that this was interesting and you're interested in learning more about Native cultures, there are additional pages. So you can learn about the Lenape. You can learn about the other tribes that are in here that also lived and still live in the northeastern United States. So that would be a really awesome thing to look into, and you can learn a lot about their cultures, and maybe you will learn something that you think you want to adopt in your life. So go ahead and fill out that exit ticket and stay tuned for our fun Friday experiment. Okay, bye everybody.